He's sitting back there in that seat behind you. And I said, where are your parents? He looks right back at me and he says, I killed them both.
On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori Slesinski vanished without a trace from Auburn, Alabama. Earlier that day, she confirmed she'd be attending a planned girls' night out at her best friend and co-worker's trailer home. When investigators arrived at her place, they found her dog left alone, the air conditioner still running, and the phone cord missing. What could explain her sudden disappearance? Did Lori leave town in a rush, or was something far more sinister at play? Welcome back to Dark Case Files, where we explore solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from around the world. Today, we're uncovering the truth behind a mysterious disappearance that took 16 years to solve. Auburn, located in Lee County, is the largest city in eastern Alabama. It's also the state's fastest-growing metro area and ranks 19th among the fastest-growing metropolitan areas in the U.S. since 1990. Known as the loveliest village on the plains, Auburn is a unique blend of Southern hospitality and cultural diversity. It's also home to Auburn University, one of the most well-known public universities in the country. Today's story centers around a former student of Auburn University, Lori Slesinski. Born on September 21, 1981, to Casey and Arlene Slesinski, Lori was blessed with blue eyes and blonde hair. She was cherished by her parents and her older brother, Paul. The family originally lived in New York State before relocating to rural Alabama, near Auburn, when Lori was just 13 years old. Growing up surrounded by animals on a farm, Lori became a passionate animal lover. Friends described Lori as beautiful, fun-loving, and full of life. She enjoyed hanging out with friends, watching movies, riding her bike, and playing video games. Alongside her hobbies, she was dedicated to her studies, and her family supported her every step of the way. After high school, she enrolled at Auburn University, majoring in psychology and minoring in criminology. To help her live comfortably, her parents purchased a mobile home in a well-kept trailer park popular with students. She lived there alone with her beloved Yorkshire Terrier, Peanut. Despite living away from home, Lori stayed close to her family. Her mom called her every day to check in. In 2005, Lori graduated with honors from Auburn University. Shortly after, she started working at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while still living in her trailer park home. She also planned to pursue a master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was incredibly proud of her accomplishments, unaware that something dark was lurking just around the corner. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori made plans for a girls' night at her best friend Lindsay Braun's house. They were looking forward to a relaxed evening with drinks and a movie. Lori and Lindsay first met in their junior year at Auburn University, where Lindsay quickly became fond of Lori's sweet, outgoing, and charming personality. Their friendship grew even closer when they both started working at the same mental health facility after graduation. At around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsay to say she needed to stop by the store before heading over for their movie night. Unfortunately, Lori never made it to Lindsay's house. When she didn't hear from Lori that night or the next day, Lindsay became increasingly worried. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her home answering machine, but Lori never called back. When Lori didn't show up for work on Monday, June 12th, Lindsay's worries intensified. It was completely out of character for Lori to miss work without notifying anyone. After Lori missed work again on Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsay and another coworker decided to check on her at her trailer home. When they arrived, Lindsay couldn't find Lori anywhere. The door was unlocked, and the air conditioner was running, which seemed odd. Inside, Lori's dog Peanut was in his crate, looking well-fed and happy, as if someone had been caring for him. Surprisingly, the crate was clean, even though Lori had already been missing for several days. Lindsay felt something was wrong. Lori would never leave her beloved pet unattended. Lindsay noticed another strange detail. Lori always kept 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because Peanut didn't like walking on the tile, but those rugs were gone. The outdoor trash can was missing too. Later that same day, June 13th, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from Lori's workplace, informing her that Lori hadn't shown up for 2 days. Arlene immediately tried to reach her daughter, but the calls went unanswered. Fearing for Lori's safety, Arlene quickly alerted her husband, Casey, and rushed to Auburn. When Arlene arrived at Lori's trailer, she was met with a chilling scene. The door was slightly ajar, Lori's bed was neatly made, but Lori was nowhere to be found, and her car was missing. Upon closer inspection, Arlene noticed that several items were gone, including Lori's kitchen rugs, a pillow from the couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that Lori used to store a rake and shovel, and the phone cord from her landline. Alarmed, Arlene felt deep in her gut that something was terribly wrong and immediately reported Lori as a missing person, though she still held on to hope that her daughter would come home. As the investigation began, police searched Lori's trailer but struggled to find any clear evidence pointing to a suspect. However, they did find troubling signs, scuff marks on the wall, suggesting a struggle. On Lori's bedsheet, they discovered semen, and traces of blood were found on the doorknob, a coat hanger, and a single gold hoop earring left behind. Investigators soon uncovered surveillance footage from June 10, 2006, showing Lori stopping at a Walmart in Alabama. It was the last confirmed sighting of her, and beyond that, no one knew what had happened. Later that same day, Arlene received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, 25-year-old Daryl Richard Ennis, known as Rick. Rick told Arlene he had seen Lori the day she disappeared and suggested she might have gone off to make a drug deal. This unexpected claim added more questions than answers, leaving Arlene even more anxious about Lori's fate. Lori first met Rick Ennis at a bowling alley where he worked, a place she often visited when she was still a student. Arlene knew who Rick was, as Lori had once invited him to spend Christmas with the family in 2005. Lori felt sorry for Rick because he didn't have a family of his own. However, despite Lori's close friendship with him, Arlene couldn't believe Rick's claim that Lori was involved in drug dealing. She felt he was blatantly lying but couldn't figure out his motive. Rick shared the same information with the police, but before they could follow up, a chilling discovery was made. On June 14, 2006, 4 days after Lori's disappearance, at around 4:40 a.m., Lori's car was found engulfed in flames on a dead-end road near the very same bowling alley where Rick had previously worked. This shocking development shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. According to investigators, the fire had completely destroyed any potential evidence inside Lori's car. Fortunately, Lori's body was not found in the vehicle. Nearby, a hand-rolled cigarette lay on the ground, and a gas can was discovered hidden in the woods close by. The incident deeply unsettled Lori's family, who were now convinced that something terrible had happened to her. The only lead they had was the information Rick Ennis had shared with Arlene. When investigators brought Ennis in for questioning, he stuck to the same story he had told Arlene but provided additional details. Ennis claimed that he and Lori had been growing marijuana together and suggested that Lori may have gone off to sell her share of the crop. He even speculated that Lori might have been dealing with dangerous people. The police searched Lori's trailer thoroughly but found no evidence linking her to drug dealing. During the interview, investigators noticed multiple scratches on Rick's hands and arms. When questioned, he claimed his dog had scratched him. However, even more unsettling information emerged when detectives spoke to Lindsay. She revealed that during her last phone conversation with Lori on the day she vanished, she had heard Rick Ennis speaking in the background. Since Rick was known to be a close friend of Lori's, Lindsay didn't think much of it at the time. Lindsay told investigators that when she texted Rick asking about Lori's whereabouts, he assured her that Lori was fine when he left her. Lindsay also shared that, before Lori's disappearance, she had confided in her about a love letter Rick had written to her, which Lori had no interest in. Lori had told Lindsay that she didn't feel the same way about Rick and planned to talk to him about it. Investigators later learned that Rick had mentioned the letter and Lori's rejection to some of her friends. When police re-interviewed him, they confronted Rick with the new information from Lindsay. He admitted to meeting with Lori hours before she vanished but insisted that she was doing well and was getting ready to go to the store when he left. However, investigators found several inconsistencies in his account. As their suspicion of Rick grew, they began to focus on him as their prime suspect. The investigation took a darker turn when police searched his car and found several troubling items, including a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs. To gather more evidence, investigators dug into Rick's past, but what they uncovered was far more chilling than they anticipated. Investigators soon uncovered a shocking revelation from Rick Ennis's past. At the age of just 12, Rick had murdered both his mother and stepfather on March 3, 1993. Just 10 months after their marriage, Rick killed his mother, who was known for her sweet, church-going nature, by beating her to death with a baseball bat after shooting her in the face. The murder took place in their trailer in North Montgomery, Alabama. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, nicknamed Elvis for his sideburns and lively personality, suffered the same tragic fate. After killing his mother, Rick shot Eddie in the face with a shotgun when he returned home from work. Following the murders, Rick drove the family car but crashed it into a fence along the highway. When Alabama State Trooper John Clark stopped him walking along the road, he asked Rick where his parents were. The young boy coldly responded that he had killed them. Upon searching Rick's backpack, Detective Clark found a kitchen knife and ammunition for both a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber weapon. When asked why he had killed his parents, Rick, without emotion, explained that he was angry because they planned to move, saying he didn't want to leave his school. Investigators believed that Rick had lived with the bodies for days while still attending school. He also confessed to plans to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked the investigators even more. At the time of his murders, although Rick Ennis's actions were horrific, his age prevented him from being tried as an adult. As a minor, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slesinski. Following Lori's disappearance, Ennis became the prime suspect in the case. Despite his disturbing past and the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, police couldn't charge him with Lori's murder due to the lack of her body or direct evidence linking him to the crime. Shortly after his interview with detectives, Ennis left Auburn and relocated, eventually settling in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By this time, Lori's case had gone cold. In Huntsville, Ennis moved in with a roommate named Abram Sissons. Abram noticed that Ennis had brought kitchen rugs with him, claiming they were a gift from Lori. He also mentioned being in love with a woman from Auburn who had vanished without a trace, though he didn't reveal her name. Abram thought nothing of it until he learned about Ennis's past. Shortly after, he asked Ennis to leave, and when he returned to his apartment, he found it completely trashed. The police later recovered the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Ennis's blood. Abram also recalled seeing a Galileo thermometer in Ennis's room, the same type that had gone missing from Lori's trailer. Sadly, even with these clues, police were still unable to definitively link Ennis to Lori's murder, and the case remained unsolved. The case remained unsolved for years, leaving Lori's grieving family waiting for answers. There were no updates for a long time. However, in 2016, after a decade of silence, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, reopened Lori's case. He established a cold case unit, with his longtime partner, Agent J.W. Barnes, joining him in the investigation. Lori's case became their first major project. They revisited all the evidence, sending several items for retesting at forensic labs, and conducted a series of interviews and re-interviews. After reviewing all the evidence, Ennis emerged as their primary suspect. Agent Whitaker, who knew of Ennis's violent past, had a strong intuition that Ennis had been involved in Lori's case, but there was no solid proof. Then, a breakthrough occurred when Agent Barnes found an unopened envelope in the files, which had been overlooked for 10 years. Inside was a report showing that the semen on Lori's bedsheet and the blood on the door of her trailer contained Ennis's DNA. With this crucial evidence, investigators built a strong case against Ennis. They managed to get an indictment in 2018. By then, Ennis had moved to Pilot, Virginia, where he was living with his fiancée, school librarian Elena Atkinson. He was employed by a company that designed and built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, on his 38th birthday, Rick Ennis was arrested by a task force of U.S. Marshals, marking a significant moment for Lori Slesinski's family, who had been waiting for answers for over a decade. However, the arrest shocked Ennis's fiancée and co-workers, who had no idea about his dark past. He was charged with 2 counts of capital murder. His trial was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it finally began on April 1, 2022. During the trial, the prosecution presented compelling evidence, including a cigarette butt and a bedsheet with Ennis's DNA, suggesting his involvement in the crime. The defense, however, argued that the police could have planted the cigarette at the crime scene, even attempting to discredit Lori's character by suggesting she was a drug dealer to explain the presence of his DNA. Ennis claimed that he had consensual sex with Lori before she went missing, but his explanation seemed unconvincing, especially when 2 new witnesses came forward with shocking information. One of Ennis's former co-workers, Jeremy Brooks, testified that on June 9, 2006, just 1 day before Lori disappeared, Ennis called him, asking if he could bring him gas. Ennis explained he had run out of fuel and needed assistance, but Brooks declined. This phone call became a critical piece of evidence when police found Lori's burnt car and a gas can, which matched the description of one that had been missing from the bowling alley where Ennis worked. Another former co-worker of Rick Ennis, Terry Booth, testified about a chilling conversation she had with him years earlier. Booth recalled asking Ennis why he had moved from Auburn, to which he responded, "I had to get rid of a body." Although Booth initially thought he was joking, Ennis's arrest for Lori's murder later made it clear that he wasn't. Despite Ennis continuing to deny all accusations and claiming his innocence, the jury found him guilty after just 2 days of deliberation. He was initially facing the death penalty, but after discussions with Arlene, the district attorney agreed to remove it from the table. Arlene, later reflecting on the decision, said that agreeing to a life sentence without parole allowed her to avoid years of appeals, while ensuring Ennis would never be free again. On April 14, 2022, Ennis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. For Arlene Slesinski, the outcome was bittersweet. With tears in her eyes, she shared that it meant she had to finally accept that Lori was never coming home, an incredible hope that a portion of her heart always clung to. As Lori Slesinski's case comes to a tragic but conclusive end, the truth behind her disappearance has finally been uncovered after 16 long years. While the pain of losing a daughter never truly fades, Arlene and the rest of Lori's family can take comfort in knowing that Rick Ennis will never again walk free. Though the location of Lori's remains may never be revealed, her memory and the fight for justice will live on. This case serves as a reminder of the importance of perseverance in the search for truth, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a story that is as heart-wrenching as it is profound. If you found this case as impactful as we have, please leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories from Dark Case Files. On the night of July 31, 1999, best friends and high school seniors J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett set out from their hometown of Dothan, Alabama. Their destination was Headland, where they planned to celebrate J.B.'s birthday. However, the two never made it to the party, losing their way instead. At around 11:30 p.m., Tracie called her mother from Ozark, assuring her they were heading back home. But they never returned. The following day, their bodies were discovered in the trunk of their car, sparking a decades-long mystery. What really happened that night? Did the party play a role, or did they encounter danger on their way back? Nestled in southeast Alabama near the Florida border, Ozark is home to Fort Rucker and sits in the heart of Dale County. With nearly 15,000 residents, it's a peaceful southern town, perfect for raising a family or enjoying retirement. But in 1999, its tranquility was shattered by a case that still haunts the community. J.B. Hilton Green Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier Beasley. After her parents separated, she moved to Dothan with her mother in 1984. Cheryl later married Joey Begun, who adored J.B. as much as her mother did. Growing up in a warm and supportive home alongside her four sisters, JB was a lively and outgoing young girl. She kept herself busy with cheerleading, dance, piano, swimming, and even modeling alongside her sisters. Above all, JB cherished spending time with her family and friends. It was in high school that she met fellow cheerleader Tracie Hawlett, and the two quickly became inseparable. Tracie Jean Hawlett was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hawlett. Tragically, her father, a Dothan police officer, passed away when Tracie was only 5 years old. Her mother later remarried Mike Roberts, who became a caring father figure. Tracie was a bit more reserved than JB, but her selflessness and protective nature were evident, especially when it came to her two younger brothers. She took her role as an older sister seriously, always looking out for them. Tracie attended Northview High School, where she earned good grades and cheered on the sidelines with JB. Despite their different personalities, the two girls formed a close bond. As they blossomed into young adults, they were bright, energetic, and full of potential. Little did anyone know, their lives would be tragically cut short, leaving a community in shock and a case that would baffle investigators for years. JB and Tracie had no idea that a tragic fate awaited them, one that would shatter all their dreams and aspirations. On the evening of July 31, 1999, at around 10:05 p.m., the two friends set off from Dothan, in JB's black 1993 Mazda 929. They were headed to a birthday party in JB's honor in Headland, just a short drive north. However, unfamiliar with the area, the girls soon found themselves struggling to navigate the unfamiliar roads. Around 10:30 p.m., after realizing they were lost, JB and Tracie pulled into a BP gas station located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431 in Headland. Using a payphone, they reached out to their friends for clearer directions. Confident they were back on track, the girls continued their drive, but instead of arriving at the party, they accidentally ended up in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland. It was clear they were still unsure of how to reach their destination. At 11:30 p.m., JB and Tracie made a stop at the Big Little store, even though it was already closed. Tracie used the store's payphone to call her mother, explaining that they had gotten lost and ended up in Ozark. She assured her mom that they were heading back home. Around the same time, a woman named Marilyn Merritt and her daughters arrived at the gas station to buy a soda. When the girls asked Marilyn for directions back to Dothan, she did her best to explain the route, and the girls seemed to understand. Marilyn later recalled that JB and Tracie looked neat and polite, and their car was clean and well kept. She watched as the girls pulled out of the parking lot, turning right just as she had advised. Though nothing seemed unusual at the time, JB Beasley and Tracie Hawlett never made it home. The next morning, on August 1, 1999, at around 8 a.m., Tracie's worried mother called the police to report her daughter missing. The authorities quickly found their first clue. Later that same day, officers successfully located JB's black 1993 Mazda 929 parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The most unsettling detail was that, despite JB filling the gas tank the day before, it was nearly empty. The car was muddy, the driver's side window was partially rolled down, yet all the doors were locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. Inside the car, JB's driver's license was on the dashboard, and both girls' purses, along with their cash, were untouched. The only missing item appeared to be JB's car keys. However, there was no trace of either girl. Detectives found a palm print on the trunk lid, which immediately gave them a chilling sense that something was terribly wrong. Convinced the locked trunk could hold crucial evidence, officers were determined to get it open. Without the car keys, however, they faced a frustrating delay. It took them 6 long hours to realize they could access the trunk using an interior latch without needing a key or a locksmith. When they finally opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside the trunk lay the lifeless bodies of JB Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Both girls were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head, Tracie in the temple and JB in the right cheek. A 9mm shell casing rested on Tracie's leg, and her arm bore scratches, while thornbriars were tangled in her jeans. JB's clothing, particularly her newly purchased shoes, was covered in mud and dirt. Authorities concluded the girls were executed, likely while trapped inside the trunk. The devastating news was delivered to their grieving families, and a formal homicide investigation began. Initially, detectives considered robbery as a motive, but this theory was quickly dismissed. The girls' purses, along with their jewelry, cash, and credit cards, were left untouched inside the car, ruling out theft as the reason for the brutal murders. Autopsies later confirmed that neither J.B. Beasley nor Tracie Hawlett had alcohol or drugs in their systems, and the report indicated that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before their deaths. This effectively ruled out a sexually motivated crime. However, over 2 months later, the state crime lab released a report revealing traces of unknown semen found on J.B.'s bra, panties, and skin. The palm print lifted from the trunk lid remained unidentified, with no matches in the database and no suspects to compare it against. Despite the widespread attention brought on by the tragic double murder, investigators struggled to zero in on a suspect. A reward was announced to encourage tips, but it led to no significant breakthroughs. Just when it seemed the case was destined to go cold, authorities received an unexpected breakthrough that would reignite the investigation. On September 1st, exactly 1 month after the tragic discovery of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett's bodies, a 28-year-old Ozark resident named Johnny William Barentine walked into the Ozark Police Department with a startling story. He claimed to have witnessed the horrific double homicide of the 2 Dothan teenagers. According to Barentine, on the night of the murders, around the same time Tracie Hawlett called her mother from the payphone at the Big Little store, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son. He alleged that during his outing he witnessed the gruesome crime. When he returned home at around 1 a.m., he appeared visibly shaken and told his wife that a black truck had hit him near Herring Road. In the days following the murders, Barentine shared his account with some friends. They encouraged him to report it to the police, believing his information could help solve the case. The possibility of earning the reward money was an added incentive, motivating him to finally come forward. Disturbingly, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny William Barentine's account changed a staggering 6 times, according to then Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey. Initially, Barentine claimed he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett were found. However, as the questioning progressed, his story continued to shift. Eventually, Barentine stated that he had picked up a tattooed man he didn't know, and the two drove past the Big Little store. He alleged that the man got into a car with 2 girls, whom Barentine identified as the murdered Dothan teenagers. According to Barentine, they ended up on Herring Avenue, where the man forced the girls out of the car. A struggle ensued as the girls tried to escape. Barentine claimed he saw something in the man's hand moments before hearing 2 gunshots. Afterward, he allegedly gave the man a ride away from the scene before heading home himself. In yet another version of events, Barentine admitted he did know the man he'd picked up, identifying him as his neighbor. Alarmingly, Barentine lived less than a mile from where the bodies were discovered. Police grew increasingly skeptical of his story, ultimately naming him the prime suspect in the murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Ozark police promptly arrested Johnny Barentine, charging him with 2 counts of capital murder. However, several inconsistencies quickly emerged in his statements. Notably, Barentine never mentioned any sexual activity that could explain the presence of semen found on JB's clothing and body. Moreover, the neighbor he accused of involvement had a verified alibi for that evening. Eyewitnesses later remarked that in his mugshot taken shortly after his arrest, Barentine appeared disoriented, as if he had just been abruptly woken from a deep sleep. During questioning, he quickly admitted that his entire story was a fabrication concocted in a misguided attempt to claim the reward money. Despite this admission, the police at the time remained convinced they had apprehended the right suspect. At the preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny Barentine had accurately described the girls' clothing and other crime scene details, implying he was present at the scene. Since his arrest, Barentine had been held without bond in the Dale County Jail in Ozark. During an October 18th bond hearing, Barentine firmly denied any involvement in the murders. He confessed to the judge that he never picked up a tattooed man or witnessed anything the night of the killings. According to him, he simply went to the BP station around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his young son and later fabricated the story to claim the reward money. Despite his admission, the judge denied his bond, and he was sent back to jail. Even throughout this ordeal, Barantine's family remained steadfast in their support. They spoke to the media, insisting on his innocence and stating he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny Barantine's lawyer, Bill Kimmins, firmly argued that his client had no connection to the double murders. He emphasized that the 4-hour-long interrogation took a heavy toll on Barantine, who got entangled in his own fabricated story during the intense questioning. Kimmins highlighted that Barantine was never informed he could use the restroom or leave freely. The defense also pointed out Barantine's limited education, stating he only completed the 7th grade and part of the 8th grade, attending special education classes. This, Kimmins argued, made it highly unlikely that Barantine could have planned such a brutal crime. On December 17, 1999, Barantine was finally released from jail when DNA evidence proved that his genetic profile did not match the semen found on JB's body and clothing. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict him, officially clearing Barantine as a suspect in the double murder. With Barantine ruled out, the investigation suffered a significant setback, and criticism of the Ozark Police Department's handling of the case began to grow. Some questioned whether the local authorities were capable of solving the case. Nonetheless, investigators still had a few potential suspects on their radar. One of the main suspects was a man from Michigan who had attended a party near the area where JB's car was later discovered. Investigators found that the man, whose identity was kept private, left town shortly after the murders. The police traveled to Michigan multiple times to speak with him. However, he couldn't account for a 3 to 4 hour gap in his whereabouts the night of the murders and made some odd remarks to others, though the authorities chose not to disclose the details of these statements. Ultimately, DNA testing excluded him as a suspect. Another important lead involved a small white pickup truck. Surveillance footage from the Big Little store, though grainy and unclear, showed the truck at the gas pumps around the same time that JB and Tracie were on the payphone with Tracie's mother. There was no digital trace to follow, as the gas pump didn't show any record of a purchase at the time. The video didn't capture anyone exiting the truck, nor did it clearly reveal the driver. After releasing a photo of the truck to the public, police appealed for tips a month into the investigation. However, both the driver and the truck seemed to disappear without a trace, and this lead eventually went cold. The final lead investigators pursued involved a man from Mississippi. The man had been arrested in Jones County for a drug-related offense and was extradited to Ozark. He had been staying with relatives in the town but left just 2 days after the murders, according to Police Chief Spivey. Investigators wanted to question the man from Mississippi regarding the case, but no valuable information emerged from this lead, and with no substantial evidence, they were forced to release him. In March 2000, a woman contacted the police, claiming she had heard screams and 2 gunshots near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits, on the night of July 31, 1999. When asked why she hadn't come forward sooner, she explained that she had been too afraid to get involved. After investigating based on her description, police found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used to kill the girls. However, the bullet's brand did not match the shell casing found on Tracie's body, and it had no markings for forensic comparison. This lead, too, turned out to be a dead end. Though many leads had failed to provide answers, investigators never gave up hope of finding a DNA match. As the devastated families of JB and Tracie tried to move on with their lives, the case grew cold. But years later, another unexpected twist brought a new layer of mystery to the case. In 2015, a shocking development emerged in the JB Beasley and Tracie Hawlett murder case. A former Ozark Auxiliary Police officer, named Rena, came forward with bombshell allegations, accusing an Ozark police officer of being responsible for the murders, with others allegedly covering it up. Rena claimed that on the night of July 31, 1999, a police officer from Ozark had pulled over JB Beasley and demanded information about cassette tapes containing recorded conversations. These tapes, according to Rena, held evidence that could have implicated Ozark police officers in an illegal cocaine distribution operation. Rena further alleged that the situation escalated into the brutal murders of JB and Tracie. She also claimed that she had been threatened by multiple law enforcement officials who knew the identity of the murderer but were involved in covering up the crime and destroying evidence. She named 3 officers, Gary Butch, Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as having harassed and threatened her. Rena even suggested that the then police chief, Tony Spivey, had been complicit in the cover-up. However, she refrained from revealing the name of the officer she accused of actually committing the murders. Renowned American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll later weighed in on the case, writing an article in which he suggested that the Ozark police officer in question may have believed that JB and Tracie were planning to use the tapes in a court case set to occur on August 2, 1999, just days after their murders. These tapes were purportedly scheduled to be entered as evidence, and Carroll speculated that this may have been a key reason for the tragic outcome. In his article, Carroll also mentioned that Rena, the former Ozark auxiliary officer who had come forward with the accusations, was severely beaten with a baseball bat after making her allegations. This brutal attack, according to Carroll, intimidated Rena into not naming the actual killer. Despite her claims, the law enforcement officials Rena accused, including Gary Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracie. Without physical evidence linking these officers to the crime, they were never formally named as suspects. Nonetheless, the allegations stirred a considerable amount of controversy, gaining traction across various true crime websites and social media platforms. This led to a defamation lawsuit being filed against those who spread the accusations, further complicating an already mysterious case. On January 29, 2016, several Ozark, Alabama police officials, including Keith Coffin, Rex Tipson, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, filed a lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews for slander and defamation of character. However, the case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum, who had previously made allegations against the officers, was convicted of harassment against JB Beasley's sister and received a suspended sentence along with a $250 fine. For years, authorities explored multiple theories and interviewed hundreds of people while collecting DNA samples from potential suspects. However, none of these efforts yielded results, and the case went cold. It would take 2 decades, along with advancements in DNA technology, before a breakthrough occurred. In March 2019, investigators sent the DNA found on J.B. Beasley's body and clothing to Parabon Nanolabs in Virginia, a company specializing in DNA phenotyping and genetics. Using public genealogy databases, the lab was able to connect the DNA to a suspect, Coley Lewis McCraney, a 45-year-old man. McCraney had never been on the radar of investigators in the case until DNA evidence finally implicated him in the brutal 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Coley McCraney, an Alabama native, graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was both an athlete and the president of the library club. After high school, he joined the U.S. Air Force, serving from 1993 to 1997. McCraney married in 1992, but his first marriage ended in separation in 1994 and later divorce. According to Dothan Eagle reports, McCraney's ex-wife filed a complaint with the Air Force in 1994, alleging that he had assaulted her. McCraney remarried in 2001 and had children with his second wife. Despite an incident of failing to pay child support in 1998, McCraney had no other significant criminal record. Over the years, he worked as a trucker for several trucking companies in Alabama and co-founded a church, where he worked as a bishop. In 1999, when the murders occurred, McCraney was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where the bodies of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett were found. After nearly 2 decades of the case remaining unsolved, McCraney was arrested following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama, on March 19, 2019. During his police interview after being taken into custody, McCraney stated that he did not know the 2 girls. The arrest of Coley McCraney brought a sense of closure to the Ozark community and the families of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett, though the motive for the murders remains unclear. As police piece together the many twists and turns of this perplexing case, one more significant turn came with the recanting of Rena Crumb's earlier allegations about police cover-ups as she testified against McCraney. McCraney, now 51 years old, faces 5 counts of capital murder for the shooting deaths of the 2 young women. He remains incarcerated in Dale County Jail, with his bond denied, as his trial awaits. For the families, the arrest brought a sense of relief, but the journey toward closure continues as they will have to relive the traumatic events through the trial process. The ultimate hope is that justice for their daughters can offer them peace after more than 2 decades of uncertainty. As for whether McCraney is truly responsible for the murders or what might have motivated him, that remains a matter for the court to decide. There are still lingering questions about the validity of the police cover-up claims, which have fueled controversy throughout the investigation. In an interview, he and his wife completely denied allegations.
He chooses to testify.
Yes.
There are some people who say that didn't help him.
If he hadn't testified, those same people would have had something to say. And he's the only one that can tell his own truth. You know, can't nobody speak for him.
So we wanted to speak to Coley McCraney. He called us from his Alabama prison.
This is a prepaid collect call from an incarcerated individual at Alabama Department of Corrections.
It's been a little more than a year since you heard a jury say guilty. Do you still remember what that felt like?
Absolutely. Every day I'm still confused. I mean, it's hard to accept and hard to believe.
Did you kill these 2 girls?
No, I did not.
Did you harm them in any way?
Absolutely not. They can call me a cheat. They can call me a dog. They can call me a lot of things at that time, but they cannot call me a killer.
What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe McCraney is guilty, and what could have driven him to commit such a crime? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for following along with this gripping story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating content like this.
With a stick. When I hit that girl the second time, and I was just in the, what the hell? There's a truck coming. There's a pickup truck right there. I mean, watching me. You know what I mean? I was like, you know, when she was still alive. I mean, she was moving and moaning. She was alive.
On October 11, 1991, Linda Little, who worked as a waitress at a restaurant in Daytona Beach, Florida, disappeared without a trace after finishing her shift. Her sudden disappearance left police confused for many years. But everything changed when the man responsible had a change of heart while in prison and confessed. So what really happened to Linda? Where did she go after leaving work that night? Was someone following her? Or did she just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Welcome back to Dark Case Files, where we explore solved, unsolved, and strange cases from around the world. Today's story is about a shocking murder mystery that finally got solved after 30 years. Let's jump into it right now. Today's story takes us to Daytona Beach, a city on the east coast of Florida's Panhandle. It's well known for its beautiful white sand beaches and the famous International Speedway, which draws racing fans from all over. The city is filled with resorts, tourist attractions, and amazing ocean views, making it a popular place for millions of visitors every year. But let's go back to where it all began. Linda was born on October 29, 1947, in North Carolina. Not much is known about her early years, except that she grew up in a loving family with 3 siblings. Her younger sister, Joy Little, said Linda was full of energy and fun to be around. Around the age of 19, Linda had her first and only child, a son named Mike Parrish. It's not known who Mike's father was or when Linda met him, but she eventually raised her son on her own, with strong support from her family. In 1989, when Linda was 41 years old, she left North Carolina and moved to Daytona Beach, Florida. Her new apartment was very close to the well-known Broadway Bridge in downtown Daytona, and she lived there alone. To support herself in the new city, she got a job as a waitress at the Chart House restaurant on South Beach Street. Her coworkers really liked her because of her cheerful attitude. Even though the pay at her job wasn't a lot, it was enough for her to manage. Linda enjoyed riding her bike and often cycled to and from work as well as other places. She owned a blue and rust-colored Murray touring bike and used it almost every day. Around that time, she started dating a man from New Smyrna Beach, which is about a 24-minute drive from Daytona Beach. Life seemed to be going well for Linda. She had a steady job, a boyfriend, supportive family, and good friends. She seemed truly happy. Sadly, she had no idea that everything she was enjoying would soon be taken away from her in the most unexpected way. By October 11, 1991, it had been almost 2 years since Linda moved to Daytona Beach. Those 2 years passed quickly, and to her, it didn't feel like it had been that long. That morning, around 1 a.m., she finished her shift at the Chart House restaurant and got ready to leave. Serving hungry guests all night had left her tired, and she was eager to go. She quickly changed into black stretch pants and a white shirt, said goodbye to her coworkers, and left the restaurant carrying her backpack. Linda always cared about how she looked, so she usually brought clean clothes and some makeup for after work, all packed neatly in her backpack. She got on her Murray touring bike and rode off toward a bar on Broadway called Matey's Brig Bar. She was planning to have a few drinks there with her friends before heading home. Once she arrived, she hopped off her bike and locked it in a spot she thought was safe. After that, she stepped inside the loud bar and soon spotted her friends sitting at a table, talking excitedly. She joined them, and they started chatting about her love life. Linda smiled as she shared details about her new boyfriend and mentioned they were planning a trip that weekend. She pulled out a Florida map from her backpack and showed them the places she and her boyfriend wanted to explore. Linda's friends were happy for her, but what they didn't know was that she hadn't told them everything. The truth was, Linda and her boyfriend were not actually going on a trip. Although they had made those plans together, her boyfriend canceled them at the last minute, saying he wanted to go deep-sea fishing instead. This change upset Linda, but she didn't tell her friends that the trip had been called off. It's still unclear why she pretended the trip was still happening. Around 2 a.m., Linda decided it was time to head home. She said goodbye to everyone, left the bar, and rode off on her bike. On the way home, she stopped at a 7-Eleven store close to her apartment to buy chocolate milk and a donut. After paying, she hopped back on her bike and continued home. That was the last time anyone saw her. The next day, Linda didn't show up for her shift at the Chart House restaurant. Her absence surprised everyone. She never missed work without letting someone know. In the past, she would call her boss or ask someone to fill in for her. Still, her coworkers stayed focused on their tasks and hoped she would be back the next day. But when she didn't show up again, concern grew. One of her coworkers finally called her sister, Joy Little, to let her know something seemed wrong. "We all knew something had happened," Joy later said when she recalled hearing about her sister's disappearance. A few days later, Linda's friend and coworker, Barbara Sheridan, officially reported her missing. At the same time, her landlord, who also hadn't seen her around, got worried and contacted the police to report her missing as well. Detectives in Daytona Beach were suddenly faced with a tough case, finding a woman who had vanished without a trace. The first place they decided to check was Linda's apartment, hoping they might find something there to help them understand what had happened. With the help of the landlord, the police entered her unit and began looking around carefully. Nothing seemed out of place, and there were no signs that anything had been disturbed. Her bed was neatly made and looked like it hadn't been used at all, which led detectives to believe that Linda never made it home after her shift on October 11th. At this point, the police knew they had a serious case on their hands. Still, they were committed to uncovering what had really happened. After searching her home, the investigation moved on to speaking with people who knew her. They asked questions around her neighborhood and also talked to coworkers and friends. That's when they learned that Linda had stopped by Matey's Brig Bar after work and later visited a 7-Eleven store nearby. But after that point, her trail went cold. No one could say what happened next. It all seemed very strange. As part of the investigation, detectives also interviewed Linda's boyfriend, since it was possible he had some answers. But even after speaking with him, they didn't uncover anything new. they were still left with more questions than answers. There was nothing that connected Linda's boyfriend to her disappearance. He told the detectives about the canceled vacation they had planned and explained that it was originally meant to celebrate their first anniversary together. During the questioning, detectives also uncovered another shocking detail. The boyfriend was already married. When Linda's family found out about this, they were stunned. They were sure Linda had no idea that the man she was dating was married. The police kept pushing forward with their investigation and began to dig even deeper. They brought in a K-9 unit to assist with the search, hoping that the trained dogs might find a clue. The areas where Linda was last seen were searched thoroughly, including wooded paths, back roads, and even nearby water bodies. But no matter how much ground they covered, they couldn't find a single piece of evidence. Linda and the bicycle she was riding were both gone. It was as if she had disappeared without a trace. The detectives strongly suspected that something terrible had happened to her, but they had no solid proof to suggest foul play. "There's no telling what happened. We had nothing to go on," said Deputy Chief Steve Perez of the Daytona Beach Police Department. Linda's family also reached out to the public, hoping someone might have seen or heard something that could help find her. They offered a $5,000 reward for any information about her location. On top of that, they printed and handed out 3,500 missing person flyers. The flyers described Linda as having reddish-brown hair, blue eyes, and standing about 5 feet 11 inches tall. Her weight was listed between 150 and 180 pounds, and they included details about the clothes she was last seen wearing. Some of these flyers were handed over to truck drivers, asking them to spread them across the country. Billboards were also put up in key spots throughout Daytona Beach to raise awareness. Desperate for any answers, Linda's family even contacted a self-proclaimed psychic, hoping for a clue to her whereabouts. Sadly, the year after Linda disappeared, her father passed away. The family, already heartbroken over Linda's vanishing, now had to face another sudden loss. It was a painful time that brought even more sorrow to those who loved her. In 1996, Linda's family received a phone call that left them both stunned and puzzled. The caller claimed to have met Linda in North Carolina. When asked for his name, he refused to share it and abruptly ended the call. The man was never heard from again, and to this day, no one knows who he was. In 2011, 20 years after Linda disappeared, her family spoke to the local media. During an interview with the Daytona Beach News Journal, they shared that they hadn't given up searching for her and still held on to hope that she would be found someday. "I've never truly grieved for her," Joy Little said at the time. "I've worked for her because I feel it's what I should do. I'm trying to find answers to questions that remain unanswered." In 2016, the case was reassigned to a new team of detectives at the Daytona Beach Police Department. However, no matter how they approached it, nothing about the case seemed to make sense. The available evidence was simply not enough to make any real progress, leaving the detectives feeling frustrated. The case would remain stagnant for another 4 years until something unexpected occurred in early January 2020. The Daytona Beach Police Department received a call from an inspector at the Tomoka Correctional Institution, which was also located in Daytona Beach. The inspector informed them about an inmate who claimed to have information regarding an unsolved murder. The inmate, 51-year-old Michael Shane Townsend, was serving a life sentence for the 2007 murder of a Titusville woman named Sherry Cormento. Townsend and Sherry had been childhood friends who reconnected after he was released from prison in late 2006. He had been incarcerated in 1994 for a series of charges, including robbery, grand theft, and burglary. After his release, Sherry allowed Townsend to stay with her family for a few days. During his stay, he brutally beat her to death with a metal fence post and a hammer. He then dragged her body to the laundry room, hiding it under a pile of clothes. Afterward, he took her vehicle and fled, eventually selling it to a group of people for an undisclosed amount. It didn't take long for Sherry's body to be found by her boyfriend, and Michael was quickly located and arrested. During the interrogation, he confessed to killing Sherry, claiming that they had been intimate and that he believed she might have knowingly given him AIDS. He said this was the reason for the murder. However, an autopsy revealed that Sherry did not have AIDS. When detectives learned about these details, they were immediately interested in what he might know about the unsolved murder of Linda Little, which he had contacted them about. An interview was arranged, and Townsend sat down to speak with detectives from the Daytona Beach Police Department. During the interview, he admitted that he was the one who had killed Linda back in 1991. Detectives were stunned by what they heard. To ensure that Townsend wasn't confusing Linda with someone else, they showed him a photo of her. He confirmed without hesitation that she was indeed the woman he remembered killing, saying, "No doubt about it." According to his statement, he had been living in Orlando but decided to travel to Daytona Beach to celebrate his birthday. He arrived in the city on October 10, 1991, and met Linda the following day at a bar in a resort hotel located at 701 South Atlantic Avenue in Daytona Beach. Unfortunately, it seemed to be a random encounter, and Linda just happened to meet the wrong person at the wrong time. Detective Sergeant Dave Dinardi of the Daytona Beach Police Department explained, "It was a random meeting, and unfortunately, Linda met the wrong person." After having a few drinks, they left the club in Michael's car. While driving, he suggested that they take a shower for some reason, which made Linda extremely upset. According to Townsend, she started yelling and screaming at him. As her noise grew louder, Townsend became increasingly angry. When he could no longer tolerate it, he slapped her hard across the face with the back of his hand. Afterward, he strangled her to death. When he realized she was dead, his next thought was to get rid of her body. He drove to Camden County in Georgia, where he disposed of her body behind a movable waste container. Detectives were amazed by the level of detail Townsend was able to provide, and they knew at that moment that the case had finally been solved. In addition to admitting to killing Linda, Michael also confessed to having killed 2 women in Memphis, Tennessee. After his confession, he explained that the reason he decided to come forward and tell the truth was because he had found God while in prison. Michael also claimed that his violent tendencies stemmed from being sexually abused by his stepfather and some family friends during his childhood. Daytona Beach Police Chief Jakari Young stated that Michael blamed his mother and the women in his life for not protecting him as a child, which led him to develop a deep hatred for women. When Linda's family was informed about the progress in the case, they felt a sense of relief and gratitude that Michael had come forward to admit to the crime. Speaking at a news conference, Linda's sister, Wanda Henson, said, "I know this is crazy, but I really want to thank Townsend for letting the family know what happened. I've been praying for closure, and God worked through him for him to have confessed to this. I've already forgiven Townsend. I refuse to live in fear, hate, and anger. It doesn't help me, it doesn't hurt anyone else except me." She also expressed her hope that other violent offenders would see Michael's story and be inspired to admit their wrongdoings so that other families could find the closure they needed as well. In December 2022, Michael pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Linda during a hearing at the Volusia County Courthouse in DeLand. Since he entered a guilty plea, prosecutors decided not to pursue the death penalty. However, he was handed another life sentence. In a press conference after the hearing, 7th Circuit State Attorney R.J. Larisa said, "The defendant is a confessed serial killer. It's gratifying to solve a cold case like this. I hope the plea brings peace to the family during the Christmas holidays." Detectives had previously tried to locate Linda's remains in the area where Michael claimed he dumped her body years ago, but they had no success. Through the dedication of detectives, the unwavering hope of Linda's family, and the confession of the killer, Linda's case was finally solved. However, the fate of Linda's body remains a mystery. There are many unanswered questions in this case which we will probably never get an answers. Such as why Linda went to meet him at first place? Where is her bike? Or was it just a big cover-up? What are your thoughts on this tragic case? Do you think Townsend's childhood abuse contributed to his hatred toward women? Or do you believe it's just a weak excuse for the actions of a mindless killer? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe.